So I had a guy asked me to kind of go back over. I made a video at a stand location where we hunt, about stand location on food plots and how to hunt food plots. And I'll give this disclaimer: I don't particularly like hunting food plots. One, you run a very high risk of spooking your deer. You have to be very intentional, very well planned, very thoughtful on stand placement. And when you place that stand, you've got to do a really good job of hiding it, of brushing it in, of brushing your entry and your exit routes in there, screening those. If you're going to hunt a food plot, you've got to be able to get in and out of it without those deer knowing you there. And I will just tell you, you know how at dark, when it calms down and the wind quits blowing, how quiet it gets, and how just a little bit of a noise, whether it be from a metal ladder stand, whether it be a wooden box stand or a poly box stand that you're in, just a little bit of noise close to a food plot and you're going to spook those deer. And that's how we developed a nocturnal deer herd in the South, is just we as hunters train them to be that way. But I wanted to go there, and there's so many different variables and different possibilities of how your food plot is set up. Many of you now when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about most of us that are hunting 10, 20, 40, 60, up to maybe 150, even 300 acres. I'm not talking about a 2,000 acre property with very little hunting pressure. I'm not talking about a property in the Midwest that they receive very little hunting pressure. And I'm talking about in the South where it's just thick cover and there's a good bit of hunting pressure. We're not, if you're looking to hunt a mature animal, you're not going to have a mature animal come into a food plot on a regular basis. It's just not in the daylight. They're going to be moving to those, and most of the time, and you know this if you've hunted long enough, you've heard that deer grunt right off the edge of that food plot during the rut. You've heard it even during the rut, even when there's a hot doe out there. Yes, sometimes they lose their mind, and that might be your only chance to see them pop out there. But you, as well as I, have heard those deer right off the edge of that food plot let off a grunt, or you've seen those does looking into the woods, and that deer, that mature animal, just never steps out in daylight. Okay, they're just smarter than we give them credit for. So I'll tell you one thing that I just see a lot of, and it's just, and I'm not trying to call people out, but we've got to be honest with ourselves if we want to develop better hunting skills and better tactics. But you got your north up here, and it's just a standard food plot. Some of you may have eighth acre, quarter acre, third, half. Some of you, if you're lucky enough in your location, you may be able to get a 1 to 2 acre food plot. It doesn't really matter. Preferably, yes, we would love to have a 3 to 5 acre central food source that's just the main attraction, and then have a kill plot or a staging plot off of that 100 or 200 yards that we could set up on to hunt, to try to kill those deer that they feel more comfortable in. But a lot of times we don't have that. A lot of times, most of you don't have that. You have your little 1/8 to a half acre food plot, and that's what you're depending on to hunt. And if you want to hunt them, if you're not willing to back off and try to get on his trail 100 to 200 yards closer to his bedding area, and it just all depends on how your property's set up. But I'm going to tell you what I see a lot, and why a lot of you are not having success on your food plots and on your small parcels. You have your food plot here, and this orange over here is the thickest part around. A lot of times you're going to have a thick side of a food plot that's going to be next to a cutover or next to just some thick area of the woods. And then you may have a lighter pine stand that's been thinned, that's almost wide open, or there may be a field edge or a road edge or something like that. So most likely your deer are coming from this south and east side. But what I see a lot of times is people are just bound and determined to be able to hunt on a north wind on all their food plots. And some food plots you can't hunt on a north wind. Okay, let's just be frank. But what I see so many times is, let's say these people's access is from the north. I see it all the time, is somebody's access is from the north, but they say, well, I want to be able to hunt that food plot on a north wind, because we do get a lot of north winds in the wintertime. And so they come down here and they think they're doing good, and they put their little box down here on the south side of this food plot to be able to hunt it on a north wind. Well, what they end up having to do is, if this is thick cover over here, and even if it's not, they either have to come out and walk the edge of this food plot around to get to their stand, or even if they're staying in the woods, they still have to come through some of this thick cover to get to their stand. And when I draw it out here past the green line, I see some of them, the box stands are stuck actually out in the food plot, or just the grass is right up to the 4x4s on the bottom of the stand, or to the ladder on the ladder stand, and it's just sitting out in the broad wide open. Okay, well, what happens, for one, is you can never get into this stand or out of this stand with any deer in this food plot without them knowing that you're there. Two, you're not going to be able to get in and out of it without some of the deer that are on the edge knowing you're there. And I will say, just to throw this out there, one long-term goal in a habitat plan is you want some bedding close to a food plot, especially if it's your main food source. You want a good bit of bedding. If you can create it on the right side and design it right, you want to create a good bit of bedding around that main food source to try to keep at least one of your doe family groups, if not a couple of them. If you have a longer linear plot, you can spread that bedding out and create some bedding for those does and little ones to keep them up close to your property, to give the rest of your property some room for bucks to want to bed. But this is just, I'm just pointing out what I see a lot of times about how people set these up, and it's just a big mistake, because you're just educating the deer to your presence. And this is a food plot set up like this is one of those that, you're doing good to see a doe and a little one, at 5:25 in the afternoon, and towards the end of the season, you can't see a deer. Okay. So let's just pretend, since we've got our access coming up right here anyway, let's just pretend that this is still our north access on a property like this. When we talk about a mature animal, a mature buck scent checking a food plot, he's going to come as the furthest, most downwind side of that food plot that he feels most comfortable checking, so before he pokes his head out and shows himself. Okay, so this food plot as it is right now is not a food plot that you can hunt on a north wind. It's just not. Okay, you may be able, if you came over here and you put a stand location over here, this may be a stand that you could hunt on a strong northeast to east northeast wind direction. In other words, where it's blowing like this. Okay, that would be the furthest most north. I would not, if it was changing to a north to a northwest, I would not hunt this stand on that. But because I'm a buck in this position right here, if this is the cover around the food plot. This buck, whether he's coming from over here, whether he's coming from here or here, if it's a northeast wind, he's going to come around this food plot and he's going to come in like this, okay? He's going to come on the downwind side. So you could get away with this on a northeast wind of setting up over here. Now the thing about, I've got it set up, and you see I'm back off the food plot. When I say setting it up like this, you've got to be able to access this stand and come in there and be able to get in and out without those deer knowing you're there. And preferably this area over here, preferably all this area over here, since I use blue, we'll say, preferably this would be a river or a lake or a wide open hardwoods, or say, since this is your access, a road over here. In other words, you want your wind to blow into a non-deer area. In other words, this stand right here, if this was the stand, you could get away with anywhere from that northeast to be the furthest most north, preferably something with more of an easterly wind, all the way to a south wind that's blowing straight that way. And on a south wind, if there's, just say this is a straight south wind, this deer, say he's down here, he's going to circle around to the furthest most thick point that he can stay in security cover and feel most comfortable, and he's going to come in this direction right here on a south wind. If that's the furthest most point of cover, that's that he can feel safe and secure, that's where he's going to come to. Because you and I both know there are some times where we see sign, whether we see scrapes or rubs around a food plot, and granted, you need to take this into consideration. A lot of that, the more pressure the property is, a lot of that sign is just made at night. Trail cameras don't lie, okay? If you're only getting nighttime pictures of your bucks, they're moving in the daylight somewhere, but they're not moving around a food source, around an open food plot like this at night. So just keep that in mind. A mature buck is going to circle whichever way the wind direction, he's going to try to circle downwind of that stand. So whatever does are out in this food plot, he doesn't even have to come out where he's visible. He can just use his nose and he can check those does. One, he's wanting to check them. Two, he's just making sure it's safe for him to come out. And if you're down here and your stand that you walked along the edge of the food plot to get to, and it's a south wind and it's blowing into that food plot, and he's just going to know you're there. And other things, so even say you put your stand down here and it's a north wind, and your wind, our logic in thinking is that, okay, well, the deer are going to be in the food plot. Hopefully they're going to come out over here, and the deer are going to be in the food plot, be a north wind, and they won't know I'm here. Okay, well, that's fine. Your does and little ones may come out over here, but he's not. Okay, there may be those 3 days out of the year where he's actually actively chasing, and he chases a doe out of here. The rest of the season, if a buck is approaching this food plot, what's he going to do? He's going to come in here. He's going to come in behind you, and you're either going to hear him blow behind you, or you're never even going to know he was there. So there's just a myriad of different possibilities of how this could play into your property. You just have to learn and have to be able to take your food source, take your cover, and learn to think like a mature buck. And you're wanting to stay hidden. You've got a great nose on you, and you can sniff out that food plot, whether a doe is out there or whether there's danger out there. And you gotta, as far as playing the wind, you gotta play that wind so that, one, your scent on entry and exit is not blowing into a deer area, that it is blowing into an area that you can sacrifice because most of the time there's no deer over there. 2, you gotta, once you get to your stand and you get in quietly and nothing knows you're there, your wind can't be blowing into that food source, okay? 3rd is if you're hunting a mature buck, that mature buck has to think that the wind is in his favor and he has to feel totally secure of coming into that food source, that he is able to check it out. That's why many times the winds that I hunt are not a perfect wind for a stand location. They're a slightly off wind. I will give you one example because I'm kind of taking a good bit of time here. I had a food plot this year, the buck that I killed, and I'm actually where my stand location is. This is north, south, just like this. My stand location is back over here, and I can slip in my access through the back side of the woods like this, and I had a good bit of cover over here. And there's just actually a logging trail that I can see down here, and then there's one over here I can see like this. I guess it comes in a little more like this. But that morning, it was a, it was a southeast wind the morning that I killed this 8-point. Where do you think that deer came from? He didn't step out in this food plot. So my wind is blowing just like this. It is just barely missing my food plot, okay? This deer comes out just like this. He wasn't coming to this stand, but he came through here and he was able to scent check this entire food plot, and he came out just enough on that lane that he could look up into that food plot, but he felt like as he was coming, and he probably crossed the road up here, as he was coming, he was scent checking this whole thing, and my wind is just slightly off, okay? In other words, if my wind would have been a straight north wind, this deer probably would have not come into there like that, okay? But that allowed me a shot opportunity at him on this lane. So I hope that helps a little bit. You just got to learn to use the wind to your advantage, but you still, that mature buck has got to feel like it's at his advantage. So hope that helps you a little bit. Placing your stands, make sure they're hidden. Make sure there's plenty of cover for you to get in and out without spooking your deer.